So, continuing the relationship continuum, there's a couple more concepts I need to get out, and this is there's some subtle things that go on, and we're going to talk about not holding people accountable to agreements they haven't made. But there's ways in which people do that they don't realize, and sometimes it occurs as subtle shaming. Sometimes it occurs as wanting other people to live into your limitations, which also shows up as them becoming smaller out of our discomfort. So one of the things, if you actually want to have a relationship that elevates, that expands, that helps each other evolve, is you want to make sure that you're not asking people to reduce themselves out of your fear. And it could be fear out of being liked, fear of how other people will think of you, fear of danger of your social reputation. Now, this doesn't mean to be irresponsible. And so I'm going to assert that there's being responsibly self-expressed. So you do want to be cautious, and the way you resolve this is by just knowing that you should be in service of others all the time. This is, by the way, if you're an agent of change. But don't hold each other accountable to agreements you haven't made. Can show up like just expressing disapproval. The other thing that people do is they negotiate for you, and often when they're negotiating for you, they're negotiating for things you don't even care about, that you don't want them to reduce themselves for, and you shouldn't be reducing yourselves for. So the way you handle that, we're going to talk about how to set all this up in the relationship genesis. How do you do that? Is go, well, do you have a request? So if they're upset and they're shaming you, or they're like, oh, you should know, or, well, do you have a request? I mean, I love you. Do you have a request? And the request has to be a request, not a demand, which means that yes and no are both fine answers. But don't negotiate for them. By the way, we all do this. And sometimes it's just because we misread a facial expression. Or sometimes it's because they said a thing, but it's just I was just in a bad mood that day, and they don't actually want you to limit your self-expression, but we limit each other all the time. Sometimes it's just subtle disapproval. It doesn't have to be all out shaming, but just subtle disapproval for how someone's behaving. How do you manage your own experience around that? You make a request. My request is in the future, you not make those kinds of jokes. Awesome, great, thank you. How do you manage it in their experience? And when they're complaining or shaming or blaming or just expressing disapproval, say, oh, thank you. Do you have a request? If they say no, then they're playing a shame blame game. If they say yes, then you have an opportunity to create a new agreement, better understanding. Things move forward with greater rapidity than they would have otherwise. This is how you play a clean game.